I am so excited about my guest and honestly just y'all like meeting her and hearing her story. Her story is amazing and it's honestly very unique in my opinion. I've had so many amazing guests, but this story sticks out. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about you.
Well, hello. My name is Melina Kane. I'm a mom of two boys from Austin, Texas, born and raised. My husband and I have been married for 13 years this October, and we have a little pup scout that we adopted a year ago. And he's like our third child at this point. Yeah. So lived here in Austin, we've got family around, community. I am a professional organizer, certified life coach. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me and where I am in my corner of the world.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm excited to just honestly get into your story. So kind of like start me off on who you were just as a little kid. Like if like you could describe yourself in like probably a few words.
Mhm.
Starting off, how would you describe your childhood?
Kind of how I guess I'd say how I was. So I was a quiet kid. I was an only child. And I know we share that. So I was an only child and, I guess a little introverted, social introvert. There wasn't a lot of kids on our street. So I think I was just a really good kid. Like I followed the rules. I was a rule follower. I still am. And yeah, just a good, quiet kid growing up.
So I love that. Yes, we do definitely relate to being like the only child and kind of be like in our own little special bubble.
Yeah. Yeah.
When looking back, I always feel like there's a transition that happens kid, teenager, and then you have young adult. From that time period, like, what would you say was your biggest shift?
I'd say there was a few, but I mean, one that I feel like happened, kind of the students was like in high school so my mom ended up having cancer in high school when I was a sophomore, and she had colorectal cancer, and I'd say that was a huge shift for me of having this awareness of how fragile our little life was and how, how dependent. I mean, obviously, how much I loved my mom and just that kind of feeling of helplessness in a situation. And I remember also just not having the tools to be able to emotionally process what was going on. I very much didn't want to think about it, right? Because there was so many emotions involved with what she was going through and the chemo and the radiation and it was really really rough. She made it through it, but praise God for that. But yeah, I'd say that was probably a first shift of mine of just having an awareness of how important, just reading like how important family was to me and that I don't have a lot of it. It's just my mom. So the thought of losing her was huge. Yeah. So I'd say that's probably the first shift, and the next shift probably came when I actually went to college. It was just a uh, very different because growing up, my mom she was very protective. I was very sheltered growing up. I think again because she wasn't expecting a child or a family, very protective of making sure that I was safe. And she was also an older mom. She had me when she was 40. So knowing, I probably term it like more of a helicopter mom is what she was like. So when I went to college, that was a huge shift for me because it's like I got to make my own choices and decisions and things. And that was things I never went to such an extreme, but it felt very freeing to, be my own person and make my own choices and feel consequences that I went through or uh you know have a new set of friends to make and those social situations because college is it's amazing. It's an interesting ecosystem of personalities and people and you're in that phase of rediscovering or discovering for the first time kind of like who you are, trying on new hats, trying on different identities. And yeah, so that was an amazing experience in that sense.
So I would love to know what was your, I always call it the coming to Jesus moment,
Mm.
because we all have that moment where like something really drastic happens where either it's like a pivot or something just happens to where it really like changes our whole life within a matter of minutes or seconds. So, what moment for you was that? Like, what was that if you could pinpoint it?
Yes, there was, I don't know if I'd call it like a moment. I'd say kind of more of a season. And for me, so I'll give a little bit of context to this season before I get to it. So growing up, talking about my mom and I, she was also she's an atheist. And so growing up, we didn't go to church. There wasn't really a whole lot of talk about religion in our home. She's very much a history buff, so there would always be like history involved. She was the type of person, we would go on road trips around just like Texas, and they have these historical markers. We would stop and she would read each and every one and read them out loud to me because I refuse to get out of the car after a little bit. Yeah, she was that kind of she loves history that much. So anyway, so it's more from like the historical point of view of things. But I had some friends, one in particular in high school, that her dad was a minister, a Methodist minister, and so mom encouraged me to go because that's where apparently like the church kids were the good kids, right? And this group of kids were like, none of them really got into trouble, things like that. That's not always the case. And so, I moved through that experience and I had a great time, did youth group, did youth band, all the things. I even, gave myself over to Jesus. But at that point, I don't think I really understood, what I was doing, the real meaning behind it. And so, that's kind of the context of it. And then when I went off to college, I tried to look for a church. I went to school at Texas Tech, which is in Lubbock, Texas, which is in it's West Texas. So it's kind of a Bible Belt area. And the churches that I found were very traditional, which is totally fine, but they were also very boring. It was, it was hard to, uh, stay connected to the sermon and things like that. Yes. So anyway, I loved my church in high school. I didn't really find a connection in college and just kind of drifted off from there. This season, this shift that I'm kind of talking about, I ended up finding a church here in Austin, close to our home, back in like 2010. And my husband and I got married 2011, and he is not a believer. And but I started to go to church and go to life group and have a group of women that I really connected with and got to learn more about the Bible. I'd never read the Bible. I had tried many times to attempt to read the Bible and didn't get past probably like a few chapters in Genesis. It was just like, wow, this is a lot. This is heavy. I don't know really what I'm reading, the context of it. So, getting to know more about the Bible, more about Jesus, more about God, that kind of led up to this season. I was still very much in the discovery phase of learning about God and being open and asking a lot of questions. Very much a newbie, like just asking so many questions. And at this point, how old was I? I don't do public math well, but I was like 30, right? 30, 31. And the real shift happened, I will say, when I had my son Jackson. So we had him in 2014, and again, I was going to church at that point, and I had this life group of women that were lovely, but I had Jackson, and unfortunately, I suffered from severe postpartum depression and anxiety. I didn't realize it because I thought, that this was just kind of normal motherhood. They don't really pair you really well, I don't feel like. And I think now there's more awareness, there's more education uh, than there was back then. social media wasn't huge still back then. So there, you're not seeing TikTok videos or Instagram reels about, motherhood and things like that. In my circle of friends, there wasn't a lot of women that had kids, or if they did, they were, maybe a little bit ahead of me, and hadn't experienced any of this. So for me, that huge shift happened. It took me about 2 years to get out of all of that. Like my body just got wrecked hormonally. I was very depressed. I mean, even now, like there's times where like I don't remember things from those few years. I'm glad I took pictures. But in that season, I was very much like leaning wholeheartedly into God because I didn't have a community of people to lean on. It was it was interesting because I vividly remember this, Shade, like I was in that life group and when I got pregnant thinking like, great, these women are going to help. They're going to be around me postpartum to kind of make sure that I'm doing okay, right? Like in the back of my mind thinking like, I'm glad I've got this community of women to surround me and to help me go through this postpartum because I don't know what I'm doing. And unfortunately, uh, in no malicious way at all, but nobody really checked on me. And that was hard because I was working full time as well. And again, there wasn't a lot of women. I worked in the construction field. It wasn't a lot of women, and if there were, none of them they weren't, pregnant or postpartum, or they hadn't been going through this. Again, just not a lot of talk about it. So it was a very, very lonely, isolating season for me because, my husband didn't understand what I was feeling because, he's never gone through depression. He certainly has never, certainly never carried a child, gone through all of that, nor will he ever. So it was very much that disconnect of I feeling disconnected from myself and feeling so disconnected from everyone else. And so the only thing that kept me here and rooted and attempting each day was God, was praying to Him, was desperately on my knees praying to Him about, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel awful. I'm tired of being in so much pain and feeling so sick and feeling like I'm failing so much as a mom. Here's this sweet baby. And I'm like, I can't take care of this child. I'm just such a wreck. And not having anyone around me to really say, like, it's okay. Like, not to say like what you're feeling is normal, but just to even feel that community of connection of like, you're not in this by yourself. You're not alone. And so that was me anchoring myself to God of just like, it feels like I have no one else. I only have Him. And that's it was very much like this is all that I have. I'm very grateful for that because, most certainly not everyone goes that direction. Right. Some people, it's a complete opposite, or they don't even know about Jesus. And so they don't even have that opportunity to even explore getting to know God more at an intimate level. But yeah, so I think when Jackson was like a year and a half, I decided to get baptized. That was a whole day in itself. Yeah, the enemy was real strong on that day. But yes, so to answer your question, that's kind of where my season of shift was in that postpartum, that desperation, that isolation, and just desperately holding on to the inkling of hope of clawing my way back out of that deep dark abyss and just praying to God that like He'll get me through it.
Whew, thank you so much for sharing that. Like, I understand a lot of what you're saying because I went through postpartum as well.
Mhm.
And it can be hard when you feel like people, like they see you and they know that you're there, but they don't really see what you're going through. It's honestly kind of like they see the surface, but they don't understand, like underneath all of that, like you are literally falling to pieces. And it's like, do you not see, like, I'm a wreck? Like, yes, I have this makeup on, but I am literally a wreck and I don't see how you don't see through all of this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that because I get it. We all have our variation of it, but at the end of the day, it's still so hard and you don't really know sometimes like when it's going to be that moment where you feel like yourself again. It's just kind of like, you're just trying to like just get through it,
Right.
every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, like, when you're gonna be yourself again, and to be fair, one of my friends says, like, "You're always in postpartum," and I think that's true. Like, you're always gonna be a different person, from the day that you give birth. You're always a different person from there, but it's that being able to reconnect with that new version of yourself, right? And welcoming and accepting that new version of yourself, and I think that's probably also the hard part is when you're in that deep postpartum depression or anxiety, like you're not welcoming or accepting much, of yourself. At least I personally wasn't. There was a lot of like anger, frustration, just not liking myself, like just being like, why can't you be stronger, why can't you be healthier, what's wrong with, just like all of those like negative thoughts. And so that's such the opposite of the vision that we have for ourselves postpartum, right? Like we have this vision, or at least I did, of like, I mean, who knows? It's the reality, right? But at least this vision of like really enjoying all those sweet moments with your baby and breastfeeding if you're able to, and I don't know, pictures and blue bonnets and with Santa and all this kind of stuff. That's kind of what you envision as like the glitter and unicorns piece of it. And the reality can be for some of us very different than what we're kind of sold in Hallmark movies.
That is so accurate. Oh my goodness. Like you worded it perfectly because when you have multiple kids at times too,
Mm,
I think at times your brain kind of tricks you into believing that because that first experience was one way, that next experience is going to be exactly the same. And it's completely the opposite sometimes.
mhm.
So I love that you said that. I love that your friend said exactly what I tell people too, that we rebirth ourselves every time we have a baby.
Yeah.
Like every time. It's so weird because you can have like five babies and literally show up as five different moms. And I know it sounds completely crazy, but it's so true. And it's weird because we change every time.
Yeah. No, you're so right.
Yeah.
You're so right. Isn't that interesting? It's a different layer of ourselves, like a new layer, a new version of ourselves. So true.
I would love to know, after going through all of these shifts and changes in your life, what has been the go to thing to just kind of like help you keep your faith and just keep you motivated throughout life? Because I do feel like after we go through a lot of things, we do have minor hiccups or moments where things can trigger us or make us kind of feel a snippet of what we used to feel. So how do you like keep going when those moments happen?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, what comes to mind for me? So I think because of that very long season of, what I'd call kind of walking through the valley with God, in my postpartum, I have this deep reassurance that uh, anytime that another, challenge comes up, or maybe I am not as connected to him, like I'm in that season right now, if I'm being very honest, like I don't feel quite as connected to him. And the beautiful thing is knowing that it's not him, it's me. Like there's this deep knowing of like he's always going to be there for me, and he's just waiting for me. And for me, it's like, okay, regardless of what I'm going through in my season, whether it's another challenge. My mom actually, speaking of seasons, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer last year. Last spring was a really, really hard year. Praise God, she got through it. with surgery and minimal radiation. We also had the ice apocalypse here in Austin, which basically, if I know you're on the other side of the world, but we lose power basically, and we're iced in for like a week. And in Austin, if it just rains, people don't know what to do. So a whole week of ice was a lot. So it was just all of these things kind of toppling on top of each other. But it's that deep reassurance of like, I know that he's there, and I just go back to him, and I go back to prayer, and I go back to his word. And that's what I'm doing in this season. When I feel a little disconnected from him, I'm like, okay, I'll go out on walks and I'll be like, all right, it's like just talking to a friend, like, hey, here's what's going on in my day. What do you have for me today? What am I missing? What do I need to pay more attention to? What am I in my head about? And it's just having that conversation. It's such a funny thing because when I was a new believer, and I don't know if you felt like this, where it's like it's almost like there was this process. I don't know if that makes it like I need to make sure that I pray a certain way, and that I read this scripture, and I do this XYZ. And now, because I've been with him and walking with him for, for some people it's their whole life. For me, it's, um, 15 years, 14 years. And now it's just like a really good friend. And I'm sure you have those friends where you're like, maybe you don't talk for, months or something like that. And then you can just call them on the phone, and it's like nothing's ever passed. Like, just pick up where you left off. That's very much what I feel like with God. It's like, there's no condemnation with not connecting with him. It's just joy when I pick up the phone and I give him a call, and he's like, I've missed you. What are you doing? Like, let's chat. Let's see what's going on. And I love that. I love that. And thankfully now, I have a very rich community, very rich. I could cry thinking about it. He took me when, that lonely, lonely, lonely period, and gifted me during COVID 2020 with just this rich, rich community of women, of believers that carried me and have completely transformed my marriage and my family. And yeah, so for that, I'm grateful. So there's always things in my life that I see that he's working in, and that I don't have to think like he's not going to pick up, he's not going to answer the phone. He always is. He's always going to be there for me. And it's just a matter of how deep I want that connection to go. Yeah.
I love the way that you describe your relationship with God, because it's literally just that, a relationship. And I think that sometimes like that is the missing piece,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
is that we can have a relationship with him. We can talk to him about anything. We can come to him anytime. There's no judgment. He loves us despite anything that happens. It's just the way that we view him that makes a huge difference, I think.
Oh, completely. Yes. It's your perception of that relationship.
Mhm.
Right. And not that, it's not like there's not the right way or the perfect way or whatever. It's an evolution, right? So I think everyone has they're in a different place in that relationship with him. Your husband or a friend, it's like there's just different seasons of that relationship. And some are deeper, some are a little bit lighter. And it's like that's definitely a hope of mine though for everyone, is they get to that point where it's almost feels like this ease of being able to just reach out to him, like not like on call, like with the bat phone or anything like that, but just like, like knowing it's like it's just this ease of a friendship, this ease of a relationship between us. And he's just excited just to talk to me, and I can connect with him in different ways and in different places. It doesn't have to be at church. It doesn't have to be, by my bedside with my scripture. It can be when I'm on a walk. It can be when I'm like, I see something beautiful and I think of him and I talk to him about that. So, and for me, it's like sunsets. Oh, Sade, I love sunsets. Like that is like,
Me too.
yeah.
Uh, it does something to you, right? Especially mentally.
It does. It moves me every time. Like, that's my favorite time of day is to go for a walk at sunset and just marvel. And I just feel so at peace. And I just know that, like, there's God. Like, he's with me. He's enjoying this sunset with me and this beauty and this calmness. And it's the sweetest thing. It's the sweetest thing.
I love that. Oh my goodness, we're so in sync because mine is walking and doing hikes and talking with God
Mm.
too. Yes, I love that.
Oh, I wish we
So
could do one together. That would be
I know, because I don't find many people that enjoy that. Because I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm turning into kind of like a hippie-ish person a little bit." You're like, "Oh, this is so beautiful. Oh, that is so gorgeous. God, you did such a great job there."
oh my goodness. Unless you start, like, hugging the trees or something like that.
All in my head, like, "Oh my gosh, you're such a great artist. This is so beautiful. You did such an amazing job."
Yeah,
Like, I'm just in awe because
yeah,
I feel like he's, like, the greatest artist ever, you know?
100%, 100%. Are you like that way with stars? Stars is my next one.
I am.
Mm,
I am. I will just sit there and stare, and I'm like, "Oh, wow, that one looks cool." My kids have made me really come into that more
mm,
because they notice details too, and we're like, "Oh, that is so cool. Look, that one looks a little different." So, yeah, I think we just all have our own way of, like, looking at things, and that one right there, it's something I feel like everyone deserves to experience at least once,
mm,
to just, kinda just find their place and just kinda be in awe
mm.
because it just makes you, like you said, perspective and the way you view things so differently, you know?
It does, it does, and it just like, I never feel alone in those moments of awe. Like,
Yes.
I feel so surrounded and safe is what I feel.
Mhm.
I just feel surrounded, safe, and in awe in those moments of like, wow, that's just amazing. You know, if he can do those things, you know, in those little details, I know he can do so much more and is doing so much more in my life, right? And that I just get to experience that beauty and awe in my daily life. It's very grounding. Yeah.
It is. That's the exact word for it. Yes, grounding.
Hmm.
It is. It levels you and brings you down to, like, reality of how, amazing things are, and honestly, how amazing the simplest things are too,
Mm,
you know? Sometimes the things that we take for granted.
100%. Yes. I've definitely been lately, on social media, there's lots of like homesteading things and accounts and things like that. And I have this little yearning. It's not going to happen, but because my husband, no, he's not going to go move to a so he barely wanted a dog. Like he's not going to get up for like chickens and all the rest of the animals. But it's that enjoyment and yearning and appreciation of the simple things, right? Um, of the working with your hands, of the things that you're doing the day to day that honestly, like I feel just again, it's like the grounding piece and just bring you that much closer to God. It's like I feel like very much like the simpler the things are, the more rooted he's in it, if that makes sense.
Does.
Like, I know
Yeah.
the stars are not simple. Scientists are gonna come at me. Like, the stars, I understand, like, these things are not simple, they're super complex, but the simplicity of them, that's what I'm talking about. Not the makings of it, that's absolutely incredible, but it's, like, the simplicity of them, of the acts of just appreciating them. Yeah.
I love that, and I totally agree, and sidebar, mine is goats, but I know my husband will definitely be like, "What?" I know that was random. I know, listeners, I know, but that yeah, mine is goats, like, I have, like, this thing, I'm like, "I just need the baby goats,
Oh,
and
that's
I
hilarious.
think all will be well."
Oh, wow. You can come to Texas. There you can have all the goats that you want. I love that you're getting, like, a step above even, like, bunnies and chickens. You're like, "I'm going straight to goats. I need some, like, real animals here that I'm gonna take care of."
Yes. I want the baby goat.
I want some baby goats. I mean, they're pretty darn
I
cute.
do.
They're
They
pretty cute.
are. I'm
Yeah.
so obsessed. So I was like, this is bad, but my husband's definitely not going to agree to this. But,
No, maybe like a
only one can be helpful. Only one can be helpful one day. Yeah.
and then put that on your vision board. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I think just
I'm going to put it on there.
sweet friend. I don't know about a goat, but
I know. I'm like, I so badly want them. Uh, so I want to thank you so much for coming on here with me and honestly just sharing your story and your journey and all the things that you learned. I know that's going to make a huge difference for someone out there because there's always someone they're going through the exact same thing. So I know that it's going to shift somebody out there for sure because I can relate to so many things that you talked about.
that's really sweet of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. Like I feel like anytime I can hear somebody else's story, it makes me feel like, okay, I can relate. I see some of myself in some of their story, and I don't feel alone in what I'm feeling. Um, and that's, I think, the biggest thing, right? Especially those hard seasons, or if you're in a relationship with non-believers, that's also super hard and challenging. And so I just hope it gives you hope, um, that that's not the end of the story, and he's always with you in those moments, in those seasons, and just keep reaching out to him, right? Just keep reaching out to him, and leaning on and finding community. That's honestly like my biggest advice is find community, whether it's online or in person. In person's best, but find somebody you can go watch some sunsets with, right? If it's not your husband, you need like at least a couple good girlfriends that can help just surround you and root you. And yes, I'm always like, find some friends. I'm always like, you need some friends. Like it's just we're just made for community. We're just made for community. So that's what I feel like your podcast is. It's a platform for community and to feel connected. And I know I appreciate that. And I know your listeners do too.
Oh, thank you so much. And that was another amazing story. I will be back again next week. Bye, y'all. Well, that's it, you all. I hope that you enjoyed every second of that episode because I definitely did. So, to make sure that you don't miss out on any new episode, click like, follow, or subscribe so that you don't miss out on anything. And I will be back again next week. Bye, y'all.